I say may have issues. I'll cut to the chase here. I have tried turning it on, although you get an electrical click from the speaker when you turn it on. We don't get any sound on any waveband. These selectors on the front aren't locking, so they should lock down when you press them. That one does and then drops out again. Now that's slightly disturbing in a way, because these things are really difficult to fix if they've gone wrong. If it's a piece of metal that's broken through metal fatigue or whatever, then we could be in trouble there, because it is probably unfixable without finding another similar radio as a donor. So if I push one of these switches, they should lock, and it's got to be something to do with that bar. I can't see anything actually broken. So if I push that, this little bar, if I push that in, it will hold that switch there. Similarly, if I press that one, that doesn't come back. It should come back and hold that in. And again, that one doesn't disengage it, so that one, this one doesn't seem to latch at all, which is slightly worrying. Or is that the one that doesn't latch? That's possibly the tuning one. I can't remember which way around this is now. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's the tuning one, so that's never supposed to latch, so that's fine for that not to latch. But these three should, and they're not doing, because that thing doesn't stick in there far enough. Now what I can see there is there's a tiny spring. I don't know if it's possible to replace that with a spring that's more springy, or whether it just needs a bit of freeing of this thing not to be quite as stiff. Right, well, we've got some good news now. Just lubricating this little slide here was enough to make these buttons latch now. So it just had a bit of, it didn't quite have enough, there was a bit of friction which was stopping the spring from pushing it back, and now these all work. So mechanically we've got that fixed done, which is good, because that was a big worry of mine, that I thought that was going to kill the whole project, and at least that seems to work. So now we can proceed with trying to sort out the electrical issues. Now what I've found now is that I think there is an issue with possibly a whisker effect on some transistors which are in this can here, because you can see, yeah, if you remember, we had quite low volume on AM, even though we had some signal, but if I tap that a bit,
an 8-unit kitchen for just £199, including cabinets, frontals.
and now we get quite decent volume. The only thing I've noticed is a bit, and I think it may be, I'm not sure if it's oscillation or just the AGC kicking in a bit too hard. If I turn it up,
and with everything supplied locally from stock, you save on time as well as the price. So get down to your local Howdens. They're bang on the money. Trade customers only.
you can hear it sort of ducking there, and I think that ducking is due to the AGC kicking in a bit too hard. And we don't have massively strong signals here, so maybe there's something odd about that. I'm guessing it's, as I said, this can here contains all the AM circuitry, and it looks a bit difficult to get off, but I think I'm going to have to try and get that off in order to have a look at those transistors and components in there. Well, I've been reading some scary stories on the internet about these sets and how to get them apart and how you can get the modules. This was both better and worse than I'd expected from that, to be honest. This thing fits in here, and as you remember, it's got like a metal can over the top of it. You can't get the metal can off while it's in the board because it's fouled by the sorry, I should say it fits in this side. It's fouled by these resistors here. You can't get the can off from the top, so what you have to do, first of all, I've taken the ferrite aerial out, which makes it a bit easier to get at. And these three were a nuisance to actually unsolder, because you have to unsolder from right under there, and there's this little red wire which attaches to the end one of them for some reason. It's very rat's nest wiring in here, as you can see. Then, having got the thing out, it was in the box, but in order to get it out of the box, these three pins here which locate it onto, solder it onto the board. You have to take the pins out before you can get the can off. So they obviously assembled it, then put the pins in. I mean, this sounds like a production nightmare, really. And I don't know what. And obviously now it's quite difficult to test it because I've got to rewire it up to the board in order to check what it does, and how it behaves, and which of these transistors might or might not be faulty. And I'll probably replace the electrolytics as well, although they don't look too bad. But given that I've got the thing apart and it was an unpleasant business to pull it apart, we might as well replace the electrolytic capacitors. I think the other capacitors should be fine. And of course the transistors, if they are faulty, I don't have any germanium transistors to replace them with. At least I might have an odd 117, I'm not sure, but it looks like replacing them with silicons, which, if it works, which it could, might, and if it doesn't, we might have to adjust the resistors. If it does, we might need to tweak the alignment again. So somehow I'm going to have to wire it back up to the set and put the aerial back so I can test the AM alignment. It's not going to be a quick one, this, is it? Okay, well, I extracted this from the can and wired it back up to the board with as short wires as I practically could. I was getting absolutely nothing from it, which is very disappointing because we did have some, at least intermittent, AM and fairly low level at times, but not absolutely nothing before. So I wondered if I'd done something wrong with the wiring or something like that, but actually I think what happens is I tapped that transistor once too many. I mean, you can only do that so much and then it just goes. Having looked, I pulled the two transistors out of the board and checked them on the transistor tester, which I'll do now. So if I can remember which leads to use and which is a screen, I think this one is the base and this one is the emitter. I'm putting the red on. This is the collector. I've got the black on at the moment. So if I run this across it, so you can see this actually says that it is a PNP transistor. It's got a bit of leakage current, which is quite high. I'll bring that back up to here. It's got reasonably high leakage current, which you expect from these old germanium transistors, but it's got about 2 and a bit. So it's got about 0.3 volts base to emitter, reasonably healthy HFE, quite a lot of leakage current, which is what we expect from these old germanium transistors, like 0.45 milliamps. So in general, this doesn't look out of spec to me for one of these transistors. And then, so with this one, we get. You notice that the HFE is very low here. It's showing up. Oh, sorry, I've got the wires in the way. Showing up as 7, which is almost no gain whatsoever. There's not much in the way of leakage current, but there's not much in the way of current either. So I'd say that's a pretty dead transistor, and it doesn't make any difference. It was obviously on its last legs. So I don't have any of these. I know you're supposed to use germanium transistors or adjust it. I had a couple of silicon PNPs. I've got loads of silicon PNPs. Put those in.
And remains over 3% lower at the forecast horizon than we expected in March.
And as you can see, AM is now working again. Right, well, it's good news on that. I put it back together. I replaced, as I said, the two AF transistors with silicon PNPs, BC327s, I think. And also, while I was at it, replaced the two electrolytic caps in there. I don't think there was anything wrong with them, but you might as well while it's such a fiddly thing to get out. I've actually remounted it with self-adhesive, really, and rather than trying to solder it back into the pins, because there was a bit of track damage in taking those out. It's quite difficult to get out unless you take the whole assembly apart, which looked really nasty. So I've just rewired it back in, and it seems to be fine. I've used the shortest wires I can reasonably do for that. And
the government that never came through, but more recently those that are still alive from the 1968 and the 74 winning sides of the African Cup of Nations, I think they're receiving about.
Yeah, we got AM working again, which is good. May not
But
be
a
able
lot
to
of
hear
them,
it
you
too
know,
well on this,
because
but
Ardy, the goalkeeper, you know, he died in poverty, you know, and he won African Player of the Year kind of thing. So these were very big players.
bass
very
and treble
skillful
controls
players.
both working.
But
All sound
back
fairly
they weren't.
clean. There's a little bit of noise on this one actually, but I'm sure we can give that a bit of a squirt. So AM seems all okay now. We need to now turn our attention to the FM side. Now, if I switch to FM, I get nothing. And these three transistors here, it's a very interesting design, this set, because it's actually got separate IF stages for AM and FM. That's not common. Usually they'd use the same transistor and a different set of coils for AM and FM, but they don't here. They've got the FM IF stages are here. This is the FM front end, which I've taken the lid off. Then the AM, I think that's the AM front end down here, sorry, and then the AMIF is in here, so, and detector as well, so obviously detector here for the FM. Obviously AM and FM detectors are usually separate, or they have to be separate, but the IF stage are often common, and this one they're not. So, you know, there's three of these horrible AF transistors that might have failed here, two more here in the front end. So I thought what I'd do is take some 10.7 megahertz from the signal generator, and if I shove that onto the, it suggests taking it into the last collector of the FM stage. So at that point I've got, you can hear I've got the IF coming through. If I go a little bit further back, it's very difficult to get at anything. This is why I've got this little bit of wire on the end of there. I can't really touch anything there with it. So if I turn it over though, there are more places that I can get at it. So I'm going to go as far as I can back, just back here, which I think is where that transistor is. Yeah. So that's the first IF transistor, and if it's working on that, that means that the IF strip is working all the way through. So those are not the issue, which means that it's the front end here that's the problem. Now we've got two transistors here. Again, the dreaded AF series ones. There's this one, which I believe is the RF, and this one, which is the oscillator mixer. I'm guessing that there's, well, I had a look on the scope and I can't see any oscillation from it, so I'm guessing this one, the oscillator mixer, is dead. Now the other big problem we've got with this is this board is soldered onto the tuning capacitor, so it's really going to be very difficult to remove. So I think what I'm going to have to do, rather than try and get it off, which could probably cause a lot of damage, I'll probably just snip those little leads as far as I can onto the transistor and try and solder onto the remaining leads and see if that helps us out.
From the BBC Sounds app, on your smart speaker,
Play BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
and on your radio.
The sound of Cambridgeshire is
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
At 2 o'clock with the latest news for Cambridgeshire, I'm Ben Stevenson. The police officer heading the investigation of a fatal...
Well, we have frequency demodulation again, which is good news. It took a little bit longer than I'd hoped. I think I got a bit over-focused on the mixer oscillator transistor being faulty, which indeed it was. I mean, I took it out, measured it, and it said it was a diode or something like that. So that definitely wasn't working, and I thought I'd covered the fact in the previous segment of the video that the IF strip, the FM IF strip, which is separate completely from the AM IF strip, was okay. So I replaced the mixer oscillator transistor with the silicon one. It didn't work. Now that's sometimes the case. Usually you can get away with replacing silicon, replacing germanium with silicon, whatever people say. However, there are cases where it is very dependent on the characteristics of the transistors, such as mixer oscillators, which rely on very specific non-linearities, where that wouldn't work. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll take, because that was an AF114, and it had AF114s in the IF strip. So I thought, well, now I know the IF strip works, so I'll take an AF114 out of the IF strip and put it in place of the mixer oscillator. Now that didn't work either, but what did happen then was I noticed that the IF response when I was testing it was much bigger. So in fact, the 114 that I'd taken from here and put in, which I then replaced with a good 117 that came out of the AM IF strip, was duff anyway. So, and then the performance of the IF strip was much better. So I thought, oh, well, in that case, I'll go back to sticking the silicon one in here, and still didn't work. And then eventually I thought, well, did I ever really check this one? And I wasn't sure, and when I took it out, I thought, I do recognise this weird pin out of that particular transistor, and I'm sure I'd checked it, and it came out okay on the transistor tester, but it still didn't work. And if I put a silicon one in there as well, it's fine, it all works now. I wasn't entirely happy, and I'm still not entirely happy about the level coming from the AM side, so I changed one of those transistors as well. Also, I went through and changed a lot of the capacitors on the audio stage. Now, there were a lot of these. I don't generally change the ones that look fairly modern if they're okay, if they look okay. I'm not generally one for wholesale capacitor replacement. It was some of these weird old types here, which this one is okay. You can tell what the polarity is. It's got a plus on it. These types, what they call them, Elko mold. Sounds like something you put on your garden, doesn't it? But anyway, I always have a difficulty working out which side of these is positive and which is negative, but I'd looked this up and I thought I got it right, and I went through and I'm pretty certain that the polarity, I got them all in the correct way. I didn't, in fact. I got one of them backwards, and the one I got backwards was the one across the big 18 volt power supply, so we had a slightly late Guy Fawkes night display. Unfortunately, I didn't get that one on video for what David Tipton calls the dumbass diary, but in any case, having cleaned it up and replaced it, that's all okay now. The telescopic aerial, going through my rapidly diminishing stock of aerials, I managed to this bit here will be difficult to replace, and that's still there, so I managed to find one that just about fits in there. It means that it won't retract fully, but you can sort of lay it flat so you can get the handle round it, and that's here I've actually had a bit of wire on from the bigger aerial so as to try and give it a bit of help, because obviously the telescopic aerial while I'm doing the demo it's hard to get it in the right position. So I think that's pretty much sorted. I will clean it up and we'll have a final assessment, I suppose. Well, while it's not perfect, and we don't strive for perfection very much on this channel, I think it's a lot better than it was, and it's cleaned up fairly nicely. They do say that you shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet, but if you read on the internet that these sets are a bit of a nightmare to work on, that is definitely something that you should believe. I generally, both doing these radios and in my previous career professionally, you often feel that people who've built things haven't really thought about the requirements or of the maintenance engineer. But it's almost with these Roberts things, particularly this one, that it feels like they've actively tried to discourage maintenance, and I'm sure that's not the case. But it's just so hard to work on. There's so many pratfalls, so many things to take off to get at the simplest things, so difficult to change transistors. Generally speaking, build quality isn't that good. Now, I'm being very negative here because I, spent quite a bit of time rescuing this set, and I think it's worth it because it actually is, for its time, quite a good set. It's FM for a start, goes up to 108, which isn't all that common. If you look at a lot of the hacker ones from that era, we've got a couple of those, and they only got up to 101, which means if you want to listen to classic FM or Heart or something in this area, well, it sucks to be you. Because in those days, there wasn't really anything up there in the 60s apart from the police, and you're not supposed to be listening to that sort of stuff anyway. So I think they're quite practical sets and can be used on an everyday basis, which a lot of these older things can't. So, yeah, mixed feelings. I think I'm glad it didn't end up being scrapped. I'm glad it was easy to fix these mechanical buttons. That was a pretty easy fix. It was more messy to try and change. There's a lot of... I mean, you can't really blame Roberts for having all these AF series transistors in. Everybody had those things at that time. They didn't realise at that time what a nightmare they were going to be and how often they were going to fail, and quite a lot of them have failed in this one. And they don't always fail in the obvious way of, they just go dead and you have to tap them to get them back, and then these go sort of... Some of these have been low gain, some of them appeared okay on the transistor tester but just didn't work. I haven't had the heart to go through and do a wholesale replacement of it, because replacing components on this is so hard, even if you don't make a fundamental mistake and blow one of them up like I did. So, yeah, I like this set. I think there's still a little bit of work left to do on it in the electronics. I'm not happy about the AM performance, not in terms of the tuning, it's more in terms of the actual levels, and it was all right when I first fixed it, and it seems to have drifted off, so it maybe needs a proper alignment. I did do some alignment on it and it seemed okay, but it seems to have gone low gain again. Whether that's another one of those pesky transistors, I don't know. But there we go. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you for the next one.